Well, hello and welcome to the realfastresults.com podcast. So pleased that you are here today. On deck, I have one of my longtime friends and collaborators and colleagues in the authorship space. His name is Derek Doepker. And I love working with Derek for a number of different reasons, and you'll see why here. But one of the things that he is an absolute tippy top expert in is in the creation of audiobooks. That is audiobooks for self-published and indie published authors. So if you are an author that has a book that does not yet have an audiobook, then this is definitely a podcast and a video for you. And I want to welcome you to the call, Derek. Thank you so much for being here. Before we jump in, let me just ask you, tell us a little bit about your background, about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Daniel. And my background does tie very much into audiobooks in the sense that before I even became an author, my degree was in music. So music composition. And during that time, going to school for music, studied audio recording. I was in the recording studio, learning a lot of the tips and tricks. And then after I graduated, moved to Los Angeles to become a rock star, play guitar in a band, was valet parking cars, broke at the time, sleeping on an air mattress. And then also doing things like audio editing for some people online, some voiceover artists. And so I got into the world of entrepreneurship, especially really when I moved out to Los Angeles. I started writing, blogging, doing different things with health and fitness, published my first Kindle book in 2012 and sold 2 copies of that first book the first month. So didn't really come out of the gate doing too well. Then I continued to invest in my education, published my third book December of that year, made almost $6,000 in royalties in 11 days. And it's like, okay, I cracked the code, continued to publish books and started coaching authors. And it was a few years after that, I started seeing the big demand for audiobooks. And it's just continued to rise year after year as more people are consuming audio and, podcasts like this. They're driving around, whether they're listening to audiobooks or podcasts or different things. And so I wanted to get my books into audiobook format. I first went with a narrator, kind of figured out the pros and cons of that. And then I discovered a way where you can record it yourself. And I was able to do that from home. And, can share some more tips and insights on that. And then I've gotten my books out in audiobook format, sold, tens of thousands of copies of audiobooks that I never would have sold if I didn't obviously have those audiobook editions available. In addition to, I've sold now over 100,000 copies of my books in the different formats. So my background in a nutshell, author, self-published, figured out how to do audiobooks. And now I, share with people like, you, if you're an author, you want to get your book out in audiobook format, what your different options are. And I'll start out by saying, as we get into this, I don't have a one size fits all solution for most things. I tend to say, here's your different options. There's pros and cons of each of these different approaches. And it's about finding what works for you. The good news is today with technology, with the ability, whether you want to do it yourself or use different tools, or if you want to go with a narrator, between these different options, you can find something that's going to work for just about any budget and be able to get your audiobook out there on Amazon, Audible, iTunes, the other major retailers. So I'm looking forward to sharing with each of you here today.
Awesome. And that's one of the things before we jump into that, let's kind of make it clear to folks, why is it even worth it for a author to do an audiobook?
The reason why it's worth it is you're just missing out on sales by not having an audiobook. For most book genres, now I guess I can start with the exception. Are there any books that don't lend themselves to audio? Well, if something's very graphic, meaning it's just very image heavy, like a graphic novel or a picture book, and there's like 7 words in the whole book and it's mostly just pictures, well, obviously that doesn't work well for audiobooks. Or cookbooks don't tend to go as audiobooks. Assuming though you have a story, whether that's a fiction story, a true story, or a nonfiction book, or a poetry book, or a memoir, or most books out there that work well as audiobooks, there's going to be a whole group of people who will only get your book if it's an audiobook format. That could be because they just only want to listen to audiobooks. They might be visually impaired, who might only get your book if it's an audio. So you're just missing out on a big chunk of the market segment. And there's some books that might sell more in audio. And even if a book sells more in ebook or print edition, it's just lost sales to not also have the audio edition and give people that option. And the thing is, if you've done the hardest work, then it's one extra little step to turn it into audio. And a real quick case study, I had a book. It was my shortest book that I published. So the audiobook was 47 minutes long. It took a few hours to record it myself, do the editing, get it all produced. That went on to sell thousands of copies as audiobooks. So it's like that was worth a few hours of my time to now be able to generate, whether it's hundreds or thousands of additional sales that are just coming in. And that's not without a whole lot of additional marketing for the audiobook. What I tend to do is I just have it available when people go on Amazon. They can click the audiobook edition or the print or the ebook, and I kind of just let people take their pick. I just send people to Amazon, and I see sales that just come in from people who end up deciding to get the audiobook. So I think the biggest thing is you have this audience that you're not going to be tapping into unless you have your book out there in audiobook format. And in the past, maybe if you're talking, well, is it worth spending thousands of dollars on a narrator? I might have said, well, only if the book's already pretty successful and things like that. Nowadays, though, there are much more affordable options to be able to create an audiobook. So as we'll dive into that, you'll see that if it's affordable, if it's accessible, and you can get it out there and just now make these potential extra sales, it just makes sense to go ahead and turn any book that you have that can work as an audiobook into an audiobook.
Yeah, Rock, and that's I've certainly found that to be true in my own publishing business, and for myself personally. I know that you're busy, I'm busy, we're all very busy, and I know that if I'm really going to consume a book, that the one format that I could have and actually consume that book is going to be audio. So if I'm looking at a new title, at buying some new book, I always look for the audiobook option first, because I know that that's the one I will actually consume. Because I've got books like all around my office, all around my house that I've never cracked. I have these great intentions, but because I don't have it in audiobook and I can't do it while I ride my bike or go to the gym or walk the dog or clean the house, I don't do it, right? Because it's the one way to consume your content that you could do while doing something else. And I think that's a very, very important point, right? To know that if you're not offering that you're missing out, as you say, on the sales. So let me ask you this question, Derek. Is it feasible, or how difficult is it for a self-published author, or a author that has maybe one or two books that they themselves have published, to actually get the book in audiobook format?
It's very feasible. So a few strategies that I can share. And before I get into that, another note on what you're saying, you bring up a great point about consumption, where we might think it's all about getting the sale. And of course, it's important to make the sale. The thing is, if someone doesn't consume your book after they purchase it, if it's just sitting there on a bookshelf or collecting digital dust on an e-reader or whatever it is, well, they're not going to leave a review. They're not going to buy your other books or products or services or things like that as a result of that book. Now, maybe they find you some other way, or they decided to get your other books for whatever reason. But really, if you want to create that fan for life, first they got to go through your book, and then that tends to be what leads them to your other offerings. So even if I could sell a book in ebook versus audiobook, and let's say I made the same amount per sale, but I know that a person is significantly more likely to actually consume the book in audio format, that's the ideal thing for you as the author, because it's through consumption that you create the fans for life. And then in terms of the feasibility of doing this, there's options. Hiring a narrator is going to be easy enough to do. it's as simple. I mean, there's different strategies. It's as simple as going into your genre and listening to some different narrators, hear who you like, and reach out to them and see if they're available. Now, the downside of that, though, is price, right? That might not be feasible for every author. Maybe not everyone has 500, 1,000, couple $1,000s to create an audiobook with a narrator. So depending on your budget, you might look at some other options that are out there. One thing that some people do is a royalty split. And the feasibility of this is there's no out-of-pocket investment for it. The downside, though, is what happens is you split 50% of your royalties with the narrator. And so that could actually cost more in the long term if your book really starts selling well and you're now giving up 50% of the royalties. If that costs you thousands of dollars, hypothetically, then that might not actually be the best long-term approach. I also don't like it because you're locked into a contract. You're not going to be able to sell direct to consumer if you want to do that. Another benefit of audiobooks, if you want to offer it as like a free download for someone to sign up for your email list, or some of these other cool things that you can do with it, you're not able to do that with the royalty split. That said, like I said, there's pros and cons. It might make sense for some authors if it's, a better than nothing approach. There's now with things like virtual voices, that's an AI option. So if you're selling on Amazon and you want your audiobook on Amazon or Audible, there's currently, at the time of recording it, this is in beta version. We'll see what the future holds for it. So that's a way that it could be fairly quickly created. Now, there's downsides to this approach in that you're limited in where you can sell it. You're limited in the price point. Again, you're not going to be able to sell direct to consumer. You can't just upload wherever you want. And so AI, I think there might be some potential with it. I still, though, and I know some listeners really value the human voice. So that can lead you to the other option, which is what I choose to do, and that is you can record it yourself. Well, how feasible is that? The equipment costs less than $150 for everything that you need. A good microphone. I can recommend a few different ones coming up here, but I mean, for as little as $70-$80, you can get a really good quality microphone and use it for all the audiobook recording. Some really basic equipment. You can use Audacity to edit the audio, record and edit. That's free. It comes with the built-in plugins and things. There are even some AI tools that assist with the editing and give you a really good quality sound. So there's still human editing that you need to do. And that's probably the biggest thing, is the actual editing part of the audiobook. Yet I've walked authors through the process, shown them how to do it. They can pick up the process in an afternoon, a couple hours of practice to be able to learn how to do it. And that's with people who have no prior experience. They've done nothing with audio or audio editing. So it's a process that it does take learning how to do. Like, it's not something that you just hit record and you're done. That is the kind of thing that I've shown authors with, like, people who describe themselves as technophobes. They're like, I'm freaked out by technology. I tend to break things. And even they've been able to do it. And another thing to keep in mind is, in terms of the time investment, this is something I recommend for any author, and you might be doing this yourself already, which is reading your manuscript out loud at least once through editing, right? So if you're doing that final read through, I go through some beta readers, I go through an editor, I'm going to do a final read through. Yes, I might have a computer read it back or whatever, but I'm going to do a read through my manuscript out loud regardless. And so for me, it's like, well, if you're already reading through your manuscript out loud at least once, and if you don't, I recommend you do, to catch mistakes and catch things that, may even trip up a narrator. All I do is I just hit record during that final read through. And now I'm getting the audiobook recorded at the same time I was, going to do that out loud read through anyway. So time investment wise, sometimes I ends up spending a lot more time trying to go back and forth with the narrator than to just be in control of it yourself. Hit the record, go ahead and get that taken care of. Then you can either learn how to edit yourself fairly quickly, or you could even outsource the editing part and then have someone else handle that. So a number of different options available to you. I'm not going to say, which one's right for every single author. Certainly, though, each one of these is feasible with a little bit of learning and know-how.
Yeah, for sure. And you make a really good point on the author that is self-narrating, essentially, because one of the things that I think is so important for authors to realize is that your long-term success as an author depends on the bond that you create with your reader. And if you are actually in their ear and reading your solutions and your take, and just the way that you express your own material can serve to create a very or a much stronger bond with your reader, which once again, that is that's your stock and trade. That's the difference between a so-so author or so-so success financially and somebody that's super successful, is if they have that bond, and the voice is can be so powerful in doing that very thing. So I really appreciate you saying that. And I know most of my own books I have self-narrated in just this way, and I'm definitely not a tech person. I'm basically all thumbs with it, but I am living proof that it is possible. And then when I do kind of trip up, I call Derek. I said, Derek, I need some help, and he lends a hand, and it's not that difficult. That's kind of the thing. So and that actually brings me to my next question is, what is sort of the basic setup and process for an author narrating their own book and then producing it and then getting it on the various marketplaces?
I covered the basic process, and I first want to emphasize something that you talked about, which is that bond. This is why I choose to self-narrate, and that's the biggest motivator, right? I mean, yes, it saves hundreds or thousands of dollars. I could still afford to hire a narrator, though, if I wanted to, and I have done that with one book before I figured it out. And by the way, I'm still very much pro hiring narrators if that's what makes sense for a particular author to do. Like you're saying, though, Daniel, for me, I want that bond. I want it in my voice. I want that connection, because to me, it's not just about them buying this book. I want that relationship where they're buying other books, they're buying courses, they're buying, if they're investing in coaching, kind of get to know you in your essence. And this is very much a nonfiction thing. Even with fiction authors I've worked with, they know sometimes how they want to bring their story to life. So this is something why I will continue to do it in my own voice, is because of creating that relationship, creating that bond with people. The process is, first up, getting the right equipment. So one thing I recommend is the right type of microphone will make all the difference. So a microphone that I do not recommend, I see a lot of people recommending it, and it's not to say it can't work, but I don't typically recommend it. And that is a Blue Yeti. I know it's going to disappoint some people that have a Blue Yeti, maybe they have a Blue Snowball, or any of these other mics that are what's called a condenser microphone. Condenser microphones work great if you're in a recording studio, if you're isolated or things like that. The challenge with recording at home with a condenser microphone is they tend to be very sensitive. They'll pick up a lot of reverb in the room, a lot of background noise, makes it harder to edit. It makes it harder to get the right kind of sound. So using what's called a dynamic microphone instead will tend to cut out a lot of that background noise and excess sounds that you don't want on the recording. And so a simple dynamic microphone that's available, the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X. There's also the Samson Q2U. Both of those, depends on where you're getting it from or things like that, but I've always seen them, less than $100 for either one of those microphones. Now I'm using a Samson Q9U. That's a little bit of a higher end microphone. It's also a dynamic microphone. So look to get a dynamic microphone if you don't already have one. A great thing is if you ever do something like go on as a podcast as a guest, like I'm doing, or if you host a podcast, this is another benefit of audio, right? Creating that bond with people, then the mic will work great for that. And if you also do videos or other types of interviews or Q&As with readers or anything that you might be using audio for, this is not only going to give you the equipment for audiobooks, it'll help you or give you the ability to do these other forms of audio content. If you can see, if you are watching the video, I have a microphone stand. If you can't see the video, it's just a stand that's holding the microphone coming up to my mouth. I'm at a standing desk. So it is ideal if you can physically stand up while recording an audiobook. That's what I do. It's what most voiceover artists will do. They'll stand up. If you have to sit, though, you can sit. If you're standing up, either putting your computer screen up on something or an e-reader up on something, you can use a music stand if you need to do that. A pop filter, it's a little circular disc that goes over front of the microphone. Give it about half a hand's length away so the air particles disperse and it doesn't create these popping sort of sounds in the microphone, which you can't really get rid of too easily after it's recorded. So with this, basic equipment, the right type of microphone, a stand, you got some headphones that you can listen back to the recording. I mean, again, all of this can be less than $150. Then if you can record in a small room, that's great, a walk-in closet or something like that. A cool tip though, if you don't have a small place to record in, like I used to be in this big open loft, and it just sounds like you're in a cave if you're recording in there. What I did is I took a patio umbrella, think like a beach umbrella, going down like a little tripod stand. And that's not the secret. The secret is now you throw a thick blanket over top of it, and it wraps around behind you, the sides, in front of you. And this creates an on-command, on-demand home recording studio. So you don't have to build a separate room in your house. You don't need a bunch of foam panels or things like that. Just an umbrella with a thick blanket thrown over top of it. And then when you're not recording, you can take it down, stick it in a corner, stick it in a closet, out of the way. So it's the right equipment. It's the right environment set up. And then you record through it. The whole secret to it really is just how you do the recording and how you edit out the mistakes and stuff like that. And I have additional training and support if anyone's interested in that, on walking you through the process. Then you record it, you edit out the mistakes, you do any sort of retakes, which means if you have to re-record a sentence or something like that, you do all that. And then you do what's called a mastering process. This is actually pretty simple, but you have to meet all the requirements if you want to be on ACX, for instance, which is Amazon, Audible, or iTunes, or the other places. So you need to master the audio. There's some effects and different settings you can use in the recording program I use is Audacity. So you would record everything. You can do it in Audacity. That's audacityteam.org to download it. Free, Mac and PC compatible. You record it in there. You do all the editing. You can apply the effects in there. I also nowadays use an AI program that can also help clean up the audio as well. So that's an alternative option to doing kind of that final mastering process. And then you upload the audiobook. So if you want to sell on Amazon, Audible, iTunes, the other places, you'll go to a distributor. So I mentioned ACX, that's Audiobooks Creation Exchange. There's also authorsrepublic.com. There's Findaway Voices. And any of these places will push your audiobook out to the different platforms. And a cool thing is a place like Findaway Voices or Authors Republic, they'll actually go to more places than just Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. And so I personally have used a combination of these places. But the idea is you don't have to upload your audiobook to 20 different places. You upload it to one of those distributors, and they will push your audiobook out to all the different places. So that's kind of the big, quick and dirty breakdown of everything. And then if you have more questions or anything on that, Daniel, you're welcome to ask about it.
Yeah, that's super cool. And one of the things that I do want to highlight is the fact that you don't, in order to produce a really good sounding audiobook, you really don't need a whole studio. What you said, it sounds like a great solution. The way I've sort of done it in the past is I've just went into set up a card table in or a TV table, I guess they called those little table with my laptop on it in a closet full of coats and stuff. And it sounds really, really good. It muffles all the sounds, and so you can do this in just about any place where you could, muffle the sound and make it so that it's a really high quality. So that's cool. And then you also mentioned that you have other resources. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You have a program I created for authors called Audiobooks Made Easy. And so this is a program that walks you through step by step exactly how to set your home studio up, which kind of really covered the basics of it here. I mean, you have most of what you need. The big secret sauce is how do you quickly edit and cut out mistakes? And this will be the difference between something taking just hours and hours and hours versus sometimes having things done, just breezing right through it, being able to cut out mistakes, do retakes and things like that. Whether you do it yourself or hire an editor or use an AI assistant, it's going to help to at least clean up some of the initial mistakes yourself. You'll save a lot of time and money. And that's really the big secret, something I call snapback editing. So you'll see how to do that, how to do some of the other things. And then you'll see if you want to use Audacity to master it, or if you want to use AI to master it, whatever path you choose. There's some slight differences. You'll see all the settings to use. And the big thing is this is a done with you program. So what can happen is some authors get started, they don't even realize they're making a mistake, and they'd have to re-record everything, and it'd be a nightmare. With this program, I will actually listen to one of your samples or a couple of your samples, and I'll keep working with you and saying, hey, everything sounds good. You're good to go. So you record 2 minutes, right? Send it to me. I can give you that green light, and then you feel confident recording your entire audiobook. Or I go, wait a second, we have to adjust something here, and we work this out from the beginning, making sure you're doing everything properly before you proceed to recording your whole entire audiobook. And then I provide additional bonuses, things on audiobook marketing, things on direct sales, things on doing ads, and all kinds of cool things with that. So I have the link around here somewhere if you want to learn more details about the program Audiobooks Made Easy.
Yeah, thanks for that. And in fact, we do have the link scrolling here or if you're listening to this on audio someplace, I've got a special link for you set up at danielhallwebinars.com, danielhallwebinars.com/audiobooks. So webinars is plural, as is audiobooks. So danielhallwebinars.com/audiobooks. And that link is immediately below if you're watching this on the realfastresults.com podcast as well. So you could check that out. Now, one of the other things I just wanted to highlight is that the offer that Daryl just made to actually listen to your stuff to make sure before you go further is huge. You have no idea how much value that is to have an additional ear, because just horror story and personal experience is I recorded an entire audiobook. This is before I knew Derek, and when I was trying to figure this out by myself, and I recorded it all wrong. And I figured it out because acx.com, which is the exchange where you upload some of your books if you're going to put it on Amazon and Audible and iTunes, they said no. They would not approve my audio. So that represented many hours of wasted time, effort, energy, and I'll just tell you, a little bit of frustration. So that not a little bit, a lot of frustration. That offer is really huge because as I will remind folks, not only is Derek a master at creating audiobooks, but he's also a musician, and that's really his background. So he knows what he's listening for, and that's really cool that you've offered that. Thank you so much for that. And let me just ask this question, Derek: what kind of timeline, or what is the timeline from sort of deciding to do an audiobook to actually having the skills necessary to putting one together?
It depends on how quickly you can pick things up. If everything is going pretty smoothly, there are people who within an afternoon, they've gotten in the training, they followed the videos, they've sent a sample and a couple samples, and they've gotten approval to now begin the whole process. There are some people who maybe there's a little more back and forth, so maybe it takes a few days. Rare cases, maybe it takes a week or two of some back and forth to kind of work out a few kinks or something in the recording process. Maybe there's something going on. Learning the actual basic fundamentals, though, I say, I mean, you can get through the course and watch the training materials within a few hours to get it down. So a little bit, some people pick it up very quickly, learning curve. Some people take a little bit more practice. Between the training and just the actual real life experimentation and practice, this is not a particularly complex process. Yet it does take knowing exactly what to do in the right order. So it's kind of like following a recipe. If you kind of get things out of order, or the way some people screw it up is they start to add, they want to complicate the process. They add things that don't need to be in there. And the beauty of this is actually very streamlined and designed to be as quick and easy as possible. So it's the kind of thing, if you got a book ready to go, I mean, within the next day or two, within this week, you can be going ahead and knocking out the recording of it. And by the way, if you don't have a book done, still is a good time to actually start learning how to do this. It's ideal to learn how to do this before a book is actually finished, because you want to start recording the audiobook a lot of times before it's published, while you're doing that final read through. And I have books that have already been published. I do the audiobooks, and I'm glad I did. Besides making the sales, I actually caught some things I wanted to update in the book. So I was able to make those updates as I was recording the audiobook. So the short answer to your question, I mean, it's kind of it depends on how quick someone can pick things up. Learning the basics of Audacity, the basics of audio editing, usually, I mean, sometimes 20 minutes to learn a few of the shortcuts and stuff. And then I'd say, give it a couple hours to get some practice in, and then you'll have, start to get the process down there.
Absolutely. And just, I know we sort of alluded to this, but I just want to put a finer point. How much experience do authors need to actually do this?
If you're trying to figure it out on your own, it can be a nightmare, and there's some misinformation. Some of it's misinformation. Some of it's just like not the most time effective. I was talking to Kevin Cruz, went through the program that I offered. He had done an audiobook, and then he went through Audiobooks Made Easy. He's like, okay, I'd probably save 20 plus hours going through the process that I was showing him. That said, assuming if you're going through the course, if you're getting guidance, then it's designed that you can have zero prior experience. It requires enough experience. You got to know how to turn on a computer. You got to know how to download a software and open it up. You got to know how to watch a video and follow along the same steps. If you've managed to get to this podcast and listen to it, though, you probably have the level of experience that you need to have someone take you by the hand, start to finish, show you how to do this.
Cool. Yeah, that's the other thing I love about this. It really democratizes the ability to actually get an audiobook to market, and they can, as we've said, can make a huge difference in your sales. So you really, it's kind of like if you want to add 25 to 50% more sales to your title, you want actual people listening to your content, then it just makes so much sense to be able to do that. That's what I love about this. That is what I love. It allows us authors to really do and get audiobooks out to our readers, to the demographic that we are seeking to serve, and in doing so in a way that we play with the big boys, and that's the other thing I really want to kind of end with, actually, and that is, there are so many titles, even to this day, that you go to Amazon, you go to Barnes and Noble, you go to whatever bookstore your online bookstore where you're shopping, and you're looking for titles. You're looking for a particular title, and many books, I don't know, maybe you have the percentages, they don't have an audiobook edition. They're just not there. And it's such a waste, because I know, like I said earlier, with many titles, if they don't have the audiobook, I just don't buy it. I just won't do it, because I know that I'll never get to it. But if they do, it's an easy yes. Just add it to the cart and go on, about my business, and listen to it later. And that's so powerful. Do you have any idea, Derek, on the percentage of audiobooks in the marketplace versus the total number of books?
I saw it years ago. I don't know that I can give a most up-to-date stat. and it might vary between indie authors and traditional authors. Last I heard, it was significantly less than 10% of indie authors had their books out in audiobook format. And I would guess it's probably still a pretty similar low percentage of indie authors who have their books out on audiobook format, which is another great point, that this gives you that advantage to potentially stand out in this marketplace. So you have this sweet spot between less competition from other authors while still having a big demand, a big base of audiobook listeners. So it just makes it that much easier for you to stand out from all the other authors by you having your book out in audiobook format.
Yeah, man. Okay, so that's great. I really want to encourage folks to get their book up on as an audiobook. Whether what's the name of the program again? Your program?
Yep, Audiobooks Made Easy.
Okay, so whether you're using Audiobooks Made Easy, or you're trying to figure this out by yourself, I do really wish you to go do it. Go actually make it happen. And the other really great consideration is that once you do learn it, not only is it, applicable to this book, that your present book, but anything that you publish in the future. And as we all know, authors can't just do one book. We've got to do many books. At least most authors that I know. So it's one of those life skills, really. Once you get it, you can use it for the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And I just love it. So with that, the place to go, if you want to check out Audiobooks Made Easy, you can go to danielhallwebinars.com/audiobooks. Link is in the chat, in the comments, in the description, somewhere around here. I strongly recommend you head on over there for many more details. And once again, thank you, Derek, for taking the time to educate my audience, my community here, about the advantages of audiobooks. And I want to see your audiobook. As a matter of fact, when you get your audiobook up, please let me know, and I will do my level best to actually promote it. How's that for additional incentive to actually make it happen? So with that, thank you, Derek. I really appreciate it. Head on over to danielhallwebinars.com/audiobooks, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.